So what's in my hand? This is a Solvita Test Kit. So we're gonna talk about this kit and actually try using it. I'm Justin with Veteran Compost. Solvita Test Kits, if you're not familiar, they measure the maturity of compost. There's some other ways to measure it that are lower cost. These kits can be a little bit expensive. In the comments or in the description below, I'll put a link to these if you want to check out their website, see more about the test itself. There's not an affiliate link, we're not getting paid for this. The way we came to have these kits is that we're doing a project where they wanted to use Solvita Test Kits to measure compost maturity as part of the project, and we said, sure, if you buy them, we'll use them because they're above our budget. And so someone bought them and here they are. So just want to talk about the kit, what it does, and we'll actually start a sample, and then 4 hours later we'll come back and see what happened. So the kit's pretty cool. Box comes in the mail. If we open it up, inside some good directions that also talk about why it's important, the things that it measures. This kit we're going to talk about measures CO2 and it measures ammonia, and that helps to determine the maturity of the compost because and we'll talk about that in a second, why we measure those two things. So some good ingredients, some good information about maturity, and then the most important thing, this handy dandy color thing at the end. You got to be a little bit of a scientist and look at these, kind of like looking at a pH test strip. But what the kit has is it has these jars, so each test uses a jar, and then there's two different types of probes. So they're in these foil packs. This is the ammonia probe, and on this side is the CO2 probe. So what we'll do is we're going to put our sample in the container, we're going to carefully unwrap and insert the probes, and then we're going to let that sit for 4 hours. So I already grabbed a sample off the pile. It was a little bit dry, so the directions will tell you if you have really dry compost, that can lead to some inaccurate results. So I'm not a big fan of bottled water, but in this case we used some bottled water just so we knew that it was kind of a standard thing we used to hydrate. And we hydrated the sample slightly, let it sit for about 5 minutes just to kind of have a little bit of equilibrium, and now we're going to put it in the container. So pretty straightforward. You're going to unscrew the lid to the container. There's all kinds of sample stuff here if you're doing a bunch of different pulls or you want to keep different readings from different things, a good label. And then there's a fill line on the container. So we're just going to fill it to the line. We're all about being direction followers here. The thing, I grabbed from two different areas on the pile to kind of have a little bit more of a representative sample. I picked out a couple of sticks just because I thought they wouldn't fit in the container. This is unscreened compost, so this is material that is awaiting screening. So it's not as fine as you would see if you had some of our screened compost. A lot of people use this for testing, maybe screened material to see if it's ready for sale. In this case, we're just kind of testing along the compost process. So just trying to pack it in there, loosely. You don't want to pack it in there too much because you're gonna, get rid of all the oxygen and the pore space. So I'm to the fill line right here, and now it's time to insert the probes. So what we'll do is set this down. Biggest thing the directions say is just don't put your fingers on the probe. So we'll do the ammonia one first. This is measuring the amount of ammonia that's off-gassing from the compost. So if you think about, if you ever stuck your head in like a chicken coop, somewhere with like really high nitrogen material, you get that waft of ammonia, really is hard to breathe. That's a sign of usually immature material because it's off-gassing ammonia. So stable compost is holding on to its nitrogen, not off-gassing. So the probe here, it's kind of like a little stick, almost looks like a garden label. This is gonna actually, this surface, this yellow measures. So we're not gonna touch that. We're gonna put that in the container where we can look at it and just insert it here. So I'll go to the side of the label and kind of push it down in there gently. I'm gonna make sure it doesn't get dirty from the compost. So just setting it in there. And then we'll turn the container around and grab the other probe, which is the CO2. So if you think about a compost that was immature, is still having a lot of decomposition, which means the microbes are consuming a lot of oxygen. So if you're consuming a lot of oxygen, you're giving off a lot of CO2. So if you had a compost sample that measured high in CO2, that means it's still working, it's still active, still decomposing. So this is going to measure the CO2, and by looking at that, we can also determine how mature is the compost. So I'll take this, you can see the purple here, we'll insert it on the other side, and these will be the two probes that we're going to seal up and leave them here for 4 hours. So after 4 hours, we'll set a timer, we'll come back, and we'll observe the colors. And what you do is, this card has for CO2 and ammonia. You take the two different readings, the color chart and the numbers, and then you compare those on a grid, which we'll look at. And by intersecting those 2 points, you can get an overall score of maturity that goes from 1 to 5, 5 being the most mature. So we're hoping that this sample is on the more mature side, and we'll see where we're at in 4 hours. Okay, so we started this sample at noon our time. Don't know what time you're watching this. And we waited 4 hours, so it's now 4 p.m. And we kept this in the office out of direct sunlight, just hanging out on someone's desk. And now we're back outside just because it's easier to film out here. So we have the sample. We brought with us our handy dandy, call it like our paint swatch card that tells us our different maturities. And then there's also finally in the instructions a chart where you can kind of crosswalk what your ammonia and your CO2 and find an overall score. You put those two numbers together. So what we'll do is, it's been 4 hours, we'll just uncap this. So unscrew the cap and then kind of bring it in a little bit closer so you can see on the CO2, we have like a dark purple. So if we get our card here, you can see it goes from high to low. So high CO2, a 1 would be very immature, going all the way up to an 8. So I'd say on this one, like we're pretty close to a 7. And I think that purple transfers pretty well. We're not all the way up there, but we're pretty close there. So obviously you can see it's pretty dramatic as you go down to the back. So that's our CO2, we'll say a 7. And then we'll pull out our ammonia and take that over here, and you can see, looking like a 5 there. So low ammonia. So if you're having a high ammonia, like we said, that smell of, if you ever smell chicken litter, it's probably one of those ones here in Maryland that'll, make your lungs hurt or your eyes bleed, is those chicken houses in that high ammonia environment. And here, we're in a low ammonia. So we have a 5 and a 7. So now we'll take out our handy dandy card. Hopefully that, I can bring it a little closer here. But if we were to take a 7, and so our Solvita CO2 was a 7 and a 5, then you're looking at an overall score of a 7. So a 7 and a 5 is an overall score of a 7 for overall maturity. So that's how it works. I mean, how we've typically done in the past is we go based on kind of time and temperature, and then observations, using your senses, smelling the compost, seeing what it looks like visually and really understanding its maturity. The cheapest option for testing maturity, and we may go into this on the next video, is seed germination tests. Hey, let's take some of that compost, let's put some seeds in it, something like a bean or a cucumber, see if it grows. But in this case, we had the Solvita kit, really nice kit, a little bit pricey, but it does work. And in this case, told us that this compost in here, very mature and almost ready for sale. So I'm Justin with Veteran Compost. This is us using a Solvita kit. If you have any questions, leave them down below, and we'll help you out. Thanks. Happy composting.